Good morning, guys, and we're here with another bedhead that's going to set up a series of bedheads, and it's one of my favorite sections of Scripture as far as in Jesus' life and the story and how it plays out. So I'll be interested in getting into this with you guys over the next 4 or 5 days. But we're going to be talking about the death of Lazarus. And if you're not familiar with who Lazarus is, that's okay, because we're about to get into it. So let's start right out. Chapter 11, verse 1 says, Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When he heard this, Jesus said, This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, Let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you are still going to go back there? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by the world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light. After he said this, he went on to tell them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going to go there and wake him up. The disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, Let us also go, that we may die with him. Okay, so kind of setting the story a little bit, but there's still a life app point in this for us. But Lazarus was a very dear friend of Jesus, to the point that when he is told the one that you love is sick, he knows exactly who they're talking about. Granted, he probably has some context as far as them saying that Mary and Martha had a message for him, but Lazarus was a very dear friend. Martha was a very dear friend. Actually, John seems to be spending quite a bit of his literary time here to remind us of just the close bonds that are here, that Lazarus was the brother of Mary and the sister of Martha, and that she was the sister of, and kind of keeps repeating over and over again the different connections, because and even where they're from Bethany. And again, I think I mentioned this in an earlier one. If you ever get time, there's not too many studies from the church that where I'm like, hey, you need to go back and watch this podcast, but because like I'm all that or whatever. But there is one on the website, and I believe it's audio only. I believe it's old enough now that it's in the classic section instead of the sermon section on Bethany. It's just a study of the town of Bethany, because Bethany was a town that was not a prominent town. It was actually for people who were kind of castaways. People that had challenges, people that had needs, and this city was an almshouse. It was one of 3 around Jerusalem, where they would kind of send the homeless and the sick so that they didn't have to deal with them in Jerusalem. And it was a town that Jesus just loved. I mean, just loved. And he would go there to rest and for sabbatical and for fun and for fellowship and for love, and it was a very uncomplicated place for him. It was kind of his sweet spot, that also had right there the Garden of Gethsemane, which you might be familiar with, where we go and pray to his Father and get rejuvenated, and the reasons why that was, why he loved Bethany so much, and what we can pull out of our lives from Bethany. That we can also embrace, that would attract Jesus. So that might be something interesting to get into, because that's a big part of this story. Is just Jesus loved this place, he loved these people dearly, and here's a situation that they're dealing with, that Mary and Martha reach out to him and say, the one that you love sick, and they know that he can heal, and they're concerned about their brother, and they want him to come, is basically what they're doing here, and wanting him to come save him so he does not die. And Jesus says this kind of interesting statement that the sickness will not end in death. No, it's for God's glory, that God's Son may be glorified through it. So I would hope that there would bring some reassurance to the people, but I'm guessing probably from a worldly standpoint. I think this might set up why the disciples later on don't even consider the fact that Lazarus might be dead when Jesus is talking about him being asleep, because Jesus told him it's not going to end in death, it's going to be for his glory. But they don't understand that God's way is different than man's way sometimes. So that might take a different path than what they expect. It might take a path through more pain and more hurt than what they were expecting when they heard these words from Jesus. So my hope is, I suspect that they went back and told Mary and Martha this, thinking that, oh, he's not going to die. This is going to be for God's glory, and maybe he's going to do one of those healings from afar, like he's done before. But he did not go. They do know that. He stayed where he was for 2 more days. So then after 2 days, he said, let's go back to Judea. The disciples, again looking from a worldly standpoint, are concerned about the stoning and about Jesus getting hurt. And then he says this comment that's kind of odd, to the point that I studied it a little bit more. Usually with Bedhead, I just kind of sit down with a couple Post-it notes and write down general thoughts as I read and just go straight. But this one caught my attention a little bit, that I wanted to study it a little bit. So it took about an extra 5 minutes to look at that, where he says, are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees the world by the world's light. It is when he walks by night that he stumbles, for he has no light. The commentaries, the things I was pulling out of it, the things I was seeing, make sense. I don't think I'd ever make this jump, but it's a kind of a contextual thing about how Jews at that time broke the day into 2 different sections: the 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of night, that you worked during the day, that you rested during the night. In that Jesus, who was coming to his final, basically, hour, we're going to find that this really catapulted, was a catalyst, what happens with Lazarus, to take things from wanting to kill Jesus to making a plan to kill Jesus. And so he knew his time was limited, his time of work was coming to an end, but if you're in the 11th hour and there's 12 hours, you still got work to do. And so he still had a job to do, basically, is what I'm saying in the commentaries, and that seems to make sense to me here, that he was saying that it's not done yet, that he has to keep going as long as his time is here. So that's why he tells them that Lazarus has fallen asleep, that he's going to go wake them up, and the disciples say, Lord, if he's sleeping, he's going to get better, because again, they're assuming he's not going to die. But then Jesus says, no, he has died, and I'm glad that he died, because we need to go and you need to see what God has in store. So the disciples, still not quite fully understanding the whole mix, took and said, well, let's go with him so we can die with him, because they just kind of assumed this was a done deal. And so, again, you kind of get that 3 Musketeers, one for all for one aspect going here, which is awesome. There's other times that they mess this up badly, but here they are ready to die with Jesus, die for Jesus. So, Life app, what kind of stands out? Well, and maybe it's just because we dug into this Sunday, talking about action, a life of action, what action steps we have from the life of Noah into our own life of being people of action, doing the Great Commission, doing it by purpose, doing it by power. And if you haven't seen that, if you're not from the church, again, that podcast is up on Facebook as well. It might really kind of speak to you depending on where you're at and what you're struggling with, if you're struggling with life and purpose in life. But this is kind of an additional point on top of that. So for those who were there, or those who have watched the podcast, it's interesting that we have to make sure that the action that we take is God's action and not our own. Jesus models this very well for us. If this was Tom and his best friend was sick and he had the power to heal, but with the touch, I think I would drop pretty much everything and just go. I don't know if I'd even put a prayer into it. You just would want to do what we consider the right thing and helping them out. Where Jesus did very well of going to that second step. Remember, if we're looking for what God's calling us to do, there's our vision, and there's around us vision, then we have to move to God's vision before we get the real vision and go into action. So here, once again, he was so in tight with Jesus, with God, through prayer, through his sabbatical time. This isn't just some special connection he has because he's Son of God. We can all do this. We can be in prayer. And the Spirit said something into his heart that said, I know you want to go. I know the logical thing is to go. I know the logical things, maybe even heal it from here. But for right now, you need to not be in action, because your action's coming in 2 days. There's something bigger here that God wants. And so that is an extra point for us when it comes to action. We have to make sure we're doing God's action and not our action. We can spend a lot of time doing a lot of work that is fruitless because it's of us. And if it's not of God, it's a waste. And so that's another bullet point in there. If you're going to be doing action, is look to the Lord, be on that that step process we talked about out of Jesus' life in Mark 1 of looking at, again, our viewpoint, other people's viewpoint, God's viewpoint, what He gives us a vision, and then doing the action, and then defending and building at the same time. I know that's, since I'm running out of time, I'm not going to go into it real deep. Most of you guys who watch this, from what I can see, understand what I'm talking about. If not, go back to the podcast on the church website and go back 2 weeks. Not this past Sunday, which would be whatever that was, the 7th, but the September 30th podcast goes into that pretty well as far as what to do if God's leading you to someplace else, a new decision, or how to make sure that you're following God. So out of the life of Jesus. So those are some thoughts. We're going to dig into this more. Again, I love this story. There's so much in it, and so I look forward to talking to you more tomorrow about it. So that's it. Talk to you guys later. Be blessed.